Peace, peace, peace. What it is, it's your brother Tyvon Swindle, aka the Orthodox Mole, wishing you all peace and blessings. And this is just a real quick source check, fam. Real quick, short and sweet. Hopefully, this will be like a half hour. But the topic at hand is such. Why is Dante running from his own Ashkenazi DNA argument? Recently, there's been a lot of back and forth between Dante and Dr. Brown and a few other people, etc. In terms of arguments that Dante was making in his books and in videos, etc., about Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry and their validity in terms of being directly connected to people in the Bible, in terms of the lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So without further ado, we're going to check out some of what Dr. Brown had to say about the matter, what Dante had to say about the matter, and we're going to go into some of the sources on the matter and let them speak for themselves. So let me just share my screen for y'all right quick. Take down this, John. Let's get this popping. And as always, family, fair use.
Yeah, quite remarkably. Okay.
Oop, I got that too fast. Hold up.
So let's go back now to Mr. Fortson, and we will listen to his next clip.
So we're gonna come over here. So in January 2006, January 21st, 2006, this is from the NCBI or NIH.gov. Let me see here. I just want to make sure I get it's all these. Here it is right here. U.S. National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health. I just want to make sure I got all these acronyms right, because we're gonna keep running across a bunch of acronyms in a bunch of different places. So this is a .gov website, so you know it's from the government. It's not from some random person. Now, here's what it says. Gene tests show that 2/5 of Ashkenazi Jews are descended from 4 women. You come down here. It says 4 founding mothers who lived in Europe 1,000 years ago were the ancestors of 2/5 of all Ashkenazi, European origin Jews. This is a conclusion of a team of researchers at the Technion and Israel Institute of Technology, Haifa. After they compared DNA sequences from nearly 2,000 Jews with those of 11,500. Let me see. I don't think that might be a typo on their part. 500 non-Jewish people in 67 different populations around the world.
Right. Exactly. Same studies that we've all looked at. Nothing new there. So roughly 40% of Ashkenazi Jews can trace back to some key women, European women who converted to Judaism and married in, or had Middle Eastern origins but were living in Europe. Yeah, no surprise there. We fully understand that, again, around the world, explaining why you have Chinese Jews, Black Jews, Hispanic Jews, white Jews, because people convert, marry in, and then the ethnicities change over the centuries. We all know that. But I want you to notice, as you scroll down in the article, it mentions Professor Skorecki, one of the key people, Professor Skorecki. It mentions his name. Well, who is this? If you go to the Bar Ilan University website, one of the top schools in Israel, it mentions Dean Professor Karl Skorecki. Professor Karl Skorecki is the dean of Bar Ilan University's Azrieli Faculty of Medicine in Safed, born and raised in Toronto. So here's his whole bio. How did Professor Skorecki become famous? Here's an article on Science Daily from July 14th, 1998, summarizing some major research. Priestly gene shared by widely dispersed Jews. The finding last year of genetic links among Jewish men thought to be descendants of the biblical high priest Aaron was greeted with tremendous interest and clamoring for more information. A team of British and Israeli scientists have now found additional information that links the priestly caste, the Kohanim, which includes men with last names that are variations on Kohen. Who is it that spearheaded this study? Professor Skorecki. He began to wonder, how was it that in the Jewish community around the world, that certain people had a history, a tradition of being priests, that they, in their names, in their customs, in their traditions, trace back to Aaron, the high priest. How was this? And was it verifiable? So he began to do these studies. And to his surprise and the amazement of others, and by the way, so priest in Hebrew is Kohen, priest plural Kohanim. So many Jews with the last name Cohen, that's what it goes back to, Kohen, priest. And that's how it was preserved in that name. Many from the tribe of Levi have the last name Levi. So what happened was Professor Skorecki and his team found that there was a common gene that would, on the male side, that would trace back to Aaron or trace back to a figure at the right time in world history in the Middle East, all traced back to the same figure. And it was commonly held by Sephardi Jews, by Ashkenazi Jews. It was even found among Lemba Jews in Africa. Isn't this remarkable? I'm going to come back to the Lemba towards the end with some fascinating data about these African Jews. But how in the world did we all end up with this same gene, those of priestly descent, unless it all went back to Aaron? If Ashkenazi Jews were converts of the Khazars, which of course is complete nonsense, but if that's where it all comes from, that's over here, that's unrelated, right? And if the Lemba Jews, they're the African Jews, they're the real Jews, they're over here, and the Sephardi Jews, they're somewhere else. How is it you trace back 4,000 years to the same genetic pool with an individual priestly descent in the Middle East? So this is of tremendous consequence, and this is in that very article. All right, so let me just log into this one article here. Let's take a look then at a little bit more in depth in some of these studies. Okay. Let's scroll down to this article that Mr. Fortson cited, right, from published in the National Library of Medicine. Gene tests show that 2/5 of Ashkenazi Jews are descended from 4 women. And let's scroll down to the paragraph which says this. The team, which studied mitochondrial DNA, so it's passed on solely by mothers to their children, found evidence of shared maternal ancestry of Ashkenazi and non-Ashkenazi Jews. A finding showing a shared ancestral pool that is consistent with previous studies that were based on the Y chromosome, so the male chromosome. This evidence pointed to a similar pattern of shared paternal ancestry of Jewish populations around the world originating in the Middle East. Exactly what we've been saying, that our origins are in the Middle East through our fathers. They concluded that the 4 founding types of mtDNA, likely to be of Middle Eastern origin, underwent a major overhaul expansion in Europe over the last 1,000 years. So even these European women had Middle Eastern background, but they were living in Europe. Fascinating, isn't it? And as Mr. Fortson notes, as you read through more of this, there's actual refutation of the idea that there's any connection to Khazarian Jews, the alleged converts and things like that. Isn't that interesting? So the article cited confirms exactly the same position that we have taken all these years. By the way, there are 2 major books. Write down the name: Kevin Allen Brooks. Kevin Allen Brooks. One of the books has this name: The Maternal Genetic Lineages of Ashkenazi Jews. Just came out in 2022. If you want to dig into this, if you want to study this in depth, The Maternal Genetic lineages of Ashkenazi Jews. Ashkenazi Jews came out October 25th, 2022. If you want to get in depth and really study this, the other book that he wrote was on the Jews of Khazariah. Find out the truth about this whole story, Jews who live there in Khazar, the alleged conversion of the Khazars. So this came out 2018, Kevin Allen Brooks, The Jews of Khazariah. So if you want to study, here's some sources where you can get into greater depth. They will confirm everything I have said thus far. So far, this study actually doesn't say anything contrary to what we've always said, that we go back to the original tribes of Israel as Ashkenazi Jews, Sephardi Jews, Mizrahi Jews, Black Jews. We go back to the original tribes of Israel, but through scattering and intermarriage, especially women converting to Judaism and then intermarrying, we take on different skin color and background. So when we talk about the suffering of the Jews in history, it's the suffering of Sephardi Jews who were kicked out of Spain. It's the suffering of Ashkenazi Jews who were slaughtered in Europe. It's the suffering of Black Jews who were discriminated within Africa. That's all part of our common heritage that we Jews have. All right, so let us get back then to the presentation and listen to more of what Mr. Fortson has to say.
That's interesting because Kessler is telling you that these people weren't Semitic. And so now, that was in 1976. So we fast forward 30 years later to 2006. It's proven that they weren't genetically Semitic.
So first thing, it has nothing to do with Kessler. Kessler's theory was an entirely separate theory, separate from the one about the origin of Ashkenazi Jews with these 2/5 coming from 4 European mothers. But the studies do confirm our Semitic descent, 100%, through the men. They actually confirm that, point in that direction, and the priestly gene common among Ashkenazi, Sephardi, and other Jews confirms that as well. The intermarriage through other women, that has been part of our history from the beginning, right in the Bible. That has happened through history. Women converting, marrying in. It has happened through history. It continues to this very day. All right, back to Mr. Fortson.
TheScientist.com. Genetic roots of Ashkenazi Jews. This is from, hold on, let me make sure I'm not skipping. Okay, so this is from October 8th, 2013. So this is 7 years later after the source I just read. So Arthur Kessler started, and then 30 years later, I just read a source that says they are European. And then now I'm going 7 years after that to 2013, October 8, 2013. Most Ashkenazi Jews traditionally believe to have descended from the ancient tribes of Israel may in fact be maternally descended from prehistoric Europeans. This is not Israelites saying this. This is not Dante making this claim. And yet they say it's racist when we say it, and the scientific community is saying it.
All right, so I'm going to come back to the racist issue in a moment. I didn't hear anything racist in Mr. Fortson's words. I didn't hear anything race baiting in his words. So if you do happen to watch this video, I appreciate the way you're presenting things. And it seems to me that you're honestly looking at the evidence.
Yeah, I'm gonna let it stop right there. Let me know if y'all can hear me okay, because my joint is slowing down on me. I got a million joints open. I'm gonna take this down and I'm gonna put up a presentation right quick. And real quick, I'm gonna put this on the screen. I definitely agree with something the Boo said, and I'll talk about this in a second. Confession, not on board with confidence with the CMH. It goes back to Aaron. I'm definitely about to comment on that. But shout out to Dr. Brown. I thought he did a good job in terms of addressing the material that was put forth by Dante. And so I'm also going to address a couple of other another source that wasn't brought up. But this is the whole point of this video. Is I was watching Dante's response, and I was surprised because I heard him talking for 3+ hours, but I didn't hear him actually address his own argumentation. So I thought Dr. Brown did a fantastic job in terms of establishing the Near Eastern origin of the Y DNA. I thought he did a good job explaining that yeah, this is how it works in the majority of Jewish populations, in the sense to where you're going to see people, and let me do it like this. You're going to see people, you're going to see Jewish people going into to different local populations, converting people and intermixing with local populations, changing their phenotype over time based upon the local population. His concept was that Jews started off brown. They went into other populations, like in Europe, and became lighter. They went into Africa, became darker, etc. Let me take this off because I don't need this on anymore. But I thought Dr. Brown did a really good job in explaining that basic concept. And I didn't really hear Dante address any of that, nor any of the refutation of the sources that Dante brought to the table. And I thought that was really telling. And this is why I talk about the concept of special pleading. Now, I know there's a lot of people that have respect for Dante out there in terms of what they consider to be his scholarship, etc., whatnot. And I have respect for methodology, right? And people checking their own methodologies, people responding to the methodology getting checked, people challenging their own methodology, etc. And so what I wasn't so happy about was not seeing Dante address the methodology questions that were being put forth to him in terms of the source material and what it had to say. So that being said, I'm just going to get into this and make this kind of short and sweet if I can. Dante's argument is that the Ashkenazi Jews are not the Israelites of the Bible. Small typo there. Fix it in real time because I'm bugged out like that. They're not the Israelites of the Bible because they have a large amount of European maternal ancestry, i.e. on the mother's side, there's a large aspect of European ancestry. So he's saying that discounts them from being the people of the Bible. I did not hear him address that argument that he makes anywhere in that 3-hour video that he was talking about. I may have missed it. I got to go over it again. But I didn't catch it. Why didn't Dante mention his own argument in the 3-hour plus video response to Dr. Brown? I'm going to answer that speculatively at the end of this, but that's a question I want people to think about, because a lot of people that are talking to me about their faith in Dante's scholarship or whatnot, they got to answer the question: why, if his scholarship was so strong and he can stand on it, why wouldn't he directly address pushback on his scholarship with scholarship going forward? Does Dante, and this is an important question, does Dante recognize that if he applied his argument equally across the board, that Lemba Jews who took exclusively Bantu women in Southeast Africa would also not be the ancient Israelites? This is an important concept, and this is why I talk about the concept of special pleading, and how this definitely shouldn't be involved in anybody's arguments who's calling themselves an Israelite, because the laws in Israel are that you need to use an even and just scale. Special pleading is not something we're literally allowed to do by the law and whatnot, right? So again, one more time, this is important, because Dante says he's not the DNA guy, so maybe he doesn't understand that, and that should be understood, and he should be given that room to move and whatnot, right? Does Dante recognize that if he applied his argument equally across the board, again, so he's saying that this Afro-Asiatic population of Israelites, right? They go into Europe, they take European women to wife and whatnot, right? And because a large chunk of their DNA, their maternal DNA, is European, that should discount them, right? So on that same basis, if you're applying the scales equally and applying the just weights or whatnot, that when this Afro-Asiatic population goes into a Bantu population, and picks up women and converts them, etc., and repopulates, etc., changes their phenotype, etc., all that type of stuff. Based upon that method, they should also not be ancient Israelites. Now that's, do me a favor, put a 1 in the chat if that makes sense to you. Put a 1 in the chat if what I'm saying right there makes sense. Like if Dante is going to apply the argument equally, he would also have to discount the Limba Jews. Okay, JT Max says he got it. Does anyone else in the chat understand the argument? Okay, got it. Got a few ones popping up. That's what's up. No two. Okay, moving forward. So I'm actually going to go back to Dante's book. So Dr. Brown was addressing Dante's video they did it a couple of years ago, but I'm going to actually address Dante's book because Dante makes the same argument in his book, but he also uses a different source than what Dr. Brown addressed. And I'm going to bring out the source that Dr. Brown showed and also the source from the book itself. But what I'm about to show is from the Black Hebrew Awakening, the Final 40 Years as Slaves in America by Dante Fortune. And so this is page 284, going from the e-copy or the digital copy of the book. And you can see where it leans in with the Khazar argument, etc., with Kessler, etc. And this is what Dr. Brown was addressing as well, on top of the Ashkenazi lineal descent back to the Near East, etc. And so when you go to the next page, we're on page 285. You see this bit here, and I'm about to read this out. Most Ashkenazi Jews are descendants of European women who converted to Judaism possibly around the time of the early Roman Empire. Concludes a new genetic study that casts doubt on many prevailing theories about the origin of Ashkenazi. The study published Tuesday is in the Journal of Nature Communications, analyzed samples of mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down only from the mother, taken from more than 3,500 people throughout the Near East, the Caucasus, and Europe, including Ashkenazi Jews. The researchers found that more than 80% of the maternal lineage of Ashkenazi Jews could not be traced to indigenous Europeans, with 4 maternal founders responsible for 40%. The study was carried out by Martin Richards of the University of Huddersfield in England, who led a team of researchers from Russia, the Czech Republic, Portugal, and the United States. Now, going on to the next page, watch how my man closes out the chapter a little bit, right? So he says here that Martin Richards' DNA research proves that people claiming to be Jews today are not the people described in the Bible. Now, so this is where people take issue with how people use source work, like how Tazra got pulled up a little bit. And I'm not taking shots at you, Tazra. I'm just talking about how people were taking issue with how sources were being used. So you can cite a source, but when you're putting extra stuff on top of it, you got to justify what you're putting on top of it, right? So it doesn't say what Dante's saying in the study. It doesn't say that it proves that they're not the people of the Bible, right? That's Dante's opinion put on top of the source, and people need to understand that. And so we're going to go through these sources and see if the opinion is justifiable. Going further. So this is one of the tests that was shown by, or the studies that was shown by Dr. Brown in the video. Gene tests show that 2/5 of Ashkenazi Jews are descended from 4 women, right? The same thing you basically heard in the book being cited there. But when you go into the article, into the study, like Dr. Brown was talking about, it proves the fact of what their claim is, though, in terms of descendancy from the Middle East and whatnot, right? And so again, it says Y chromosome. This evidence pointed to a similar pattern of shared paternal ancestry of Jewish populations around the world originating in the Middle East. So again, this is what Dr. Brown was saying, is that the very paper cited was proving the point against what Dante was saying. And so I'm not calling Dante pseudo, right? But I'm going to quote a phrase that you'll hear on the Dagger Squad and other places quite often, that a pseudo always dies at their own source. And so if Dante doesn't want to be considered pseudo, he needs to come back and address this concept and just be honest about it. Like, so in the scholastic realm, people are right and wrong all the time. When you're wrong, you say you're wrong. Oh, I misread that. I was just talking about that earlier with the urban apologists and whatnot. I misheard them say something and whatnot. I had to correct them. I was like, oh, I misheard you. My fault. I was going in making arguments. I thought you said this and that. Oh, my fault. It's not a big deal. People get stuff wrong all the time. Nobody's scholastically perfect in this joint, right? And nobody's going to look down on nobody for like, you know what, I got that. I misread that source. I wasn't trying to misrepresent the source. I misread the source, right? No one's going to disrespect that. People are only going to gain respect for your scholarship when you handle stuff like that. Going forward. Now, this is the study that was referenced in Dante's book, and you can see Martin Richards right here. A substantial prehistoric European ancestry amongst Ashkenazi maternal lineages. And you'll see here in the abstract, I'll just read the whole thing. The origin of Ashkenazi Jews remains highly controversial. Like Judaism, mitochondrial DNA is passed along the maternal line. Its variation in the Ashkenazim is highly distinctive, with 4 major and numerous minor founders. However, due to their rarity in the general population, these founders have been difficult to trace to a source. Here we show that all 4 major founders of Ashkenazi mtDNA variations have ancestry in prehistoric Europe, rather than the Near East or Caucasus. Furthermore, most of the remaining minor founders share a similar deep European ancestry. Thus, the great majority of Ashkenazi maternal lineages were not brought from the Levant, as commonly supposed, nor recruited in the Caucasus, as sometimes suggested, but assimilated within Europe. Going further into the study, it raises an interesting point. We are then faced with several competing models for Ashkenazi origins: a Levantine ancestry, a medieval West European ancestry, a North Caucasian ancestry, or of course a blend of these. Right? So how do you figure that out? How do you deal with that issue? How do you weed through all that and find out which is which? This problem can be resolved by reconstructing the relationships genealogically, rather than relying on allele frequencies using the non-recombining marker systems, the paternally inherited male-specific part of the Y chromosome, and the maternally inherited mitochondrial DNA. This kind of analysis can be very powerful because nesting of particular lineages within clusters from a particular geographical region allow us to pinpoint the source for those lineages by applying this parsimony principle. So long story short, they're saying, if you want to find out who's who and all this and where they go back from and all that type of stuff, you don't look at the allele frequencies or whatnot. You stop looking at the autosomal DNA. You got to start looking at the sex chromosomes. You got to start looking at the lineage and whatnot, right? And so when applying said parsimony principle, it says this has indeed been attempted with MSY results interpreted plausibly to suggest an overwhelmingly majority of Near Eastern ancestry on the Ashkenazi male line of descent. One more time. So when they're applying this Y chromosome concept, trying to figure out where people are coming back from in these different populations, they're saying this has indeed been attempted with the MSY results interpreted plausibly to suggest an overwhelming majority of Near Eastern ancestry on the Ashkenazi male line of descent. So even the paper that Dante was citing in his own book was pointing him in the opposite direction, but he wasn't saying that to the people. Now it's either because he does not know that, he did not understand that, or there's the other end where he knew it, he saw it, he misrepresented it on purpose, etc., etc., etc. I'm not making the claim that he was misrepresenting anything. Right? I'm gonna take him at his word that he says he's not the DNA guy, right? And maybe this parsing this stuff might have gone over his head because he might have been just control F in the thing and just trying to find some stuff, right? Because that's what happens when you start quote mining stuff and you're just looking for specific topics in a paper and you don't look at the phrase within the context of the full paper, right? That can happen to the best of us, right? And that's why it's important not to quote mine. It's important to read things in context, 100%. This is something I also want to talk about because Dr. Brown brought it up, and it's important to understand with Dilemma and also with Dante. So, Abu said, I don't have high confidence in being able to determine the lineage of Aaron with the Kohanim gene concept, right? However, in terms of plausibility, I don't mind the methodology in any way, shape, or form. I think the methodology is sound. And if you're going to say it's definite Aaron, got a problem. If you're going to talk about plausibility in terms of lineage, it makes total sense because you don't have a body and it's the best you can do. You can say, okay, I can go around the world. And I can see who has what lineage and whatnot, right? Who's claiming to be Jews and whatnot, right? And I can test their priestly lineage, or I can test their lineages period, and see what matches up and whatnot, right? So as a general principle, I really, I actually appreciate the concept, right? It needs to be understood when you apply that principle that there's going to be two major groups that you're going to find a big chunk of lineage going back to in terms of where people descend from and whatnot. So you're going to find a big chunk of people going back to J, and a big chunk of people going back to E. One more time, a big chunk of people going back to J and E. I always make the joke that that's the E and J block party right there, right? That at the mixed multitude, you're already at the outset of Israel, you're guaranteed to see a big chunk in J and a big chunk of E and whatnot, right? Why is that important? That's important because that's sound methodology for finding stuff out, like who does go back to the mixed multitude, right? That you can make plausibility models, but then those have to be proven out by archaeology and whatnot. We don't have that genetic evidence and whatnot, right? So that's why I'm saying I don't have confidence in the Kohanim gene. So you can definitively say it's Aaron because we don't have Aaron's DNA yet, right? So the best we can say is most likely it goes back to J or it goes back to E. We literally have Samaritans like Levites and whatnot that have the E haplogroup and whatnot. So it's a plausible argument and whatnot. And there's also people who have the EM123. Why is that important? That's an upward clade of what Dante has. Dante is EM84. He's E1B1B. He's like me. Not many people not many African Americans have my haplogroup. Not many African Americans have his haplogroup, right? I'm EM33. He's a subclade of EM34. He's EM84, right? It's a subclade of DNA that my grandfather, my mother's side shares, right? A lot of Sephardic Jews, a lot of Ashkenazi Jews, etc. A lot of Ethiopian Jews, Libyan Jews, etc. A lot of them share paternal ancestry with Dante, and you can show that via the same methodology you're doing with haplogroup J. You can go amongst all these different Jewish groups and see this clade there, right? So there's no reason why Dante's DNA doesn't have just as much a shot as haplogroup J, right? In terms of going back paternally to Jacob, Levi, Aaron, all that type of stuff, right? Abraham, all that stuff, right? There's no reason why it doesn't have just as much of a shot, but it's based upon the same methodology. I'm going around to all these different groups and I'm seeing what's common amongst them. So I'm going to close this out here because I don't want to be too long. Before I do that, I'm going to make sure I don't have any questions in the chat. Quickly read through these. Okay, good morning. So just running through this one more time to keep it short and sweet for the people. Dante's argument is that the Ashkenazi Jews are not the Israelites of the Bible. Bro, I duplicated and forgot to fix this one. Yep. Are not the Israelites of the Bible because they have a large amount of European maternal ancestry. Right. Now, that's in his books. That's in his videos and whatnot, right? But that was not in his response to what Dr. Brown put to him. So when Dr. Brown responded to him, he was responding, amongst other things, he was responding to this argument here. He was responding to the Keza argument and also this argument. However, Dante did not address any responses to this argument. And that's the whole point of me doing this video here. Why didn't Dante mention his own argument in the 3-hour plus video response to Dr. Brown? I'm going to say it like this. Personally, I think Dante was embarrassed to address it, because if he does keep it on even scales, he does have, not only does he have to reject the Limba, he has to reject any Jewish population going to West Africa and mixing with West African women. So when you juxtapose this on the African American population, he by default is discounting the African American population and the East African population in terms of Jewish ancestry, if you apply the argument that he's applying to Ashkenazi Jews. That's my take on it. I think he's embarrassed to address that part. However, I don't think there's any reason to be embarrassed about it, because when he put this information out in his book, this is way before he was saying he wasn't the DNA guy. So he wasn't the DNA guy when he put the information in his book to begin with, right? So on a scholastic level, this should be as simple as, you know what, let me make the public video. You know what, Dr. Brown, you're right about that part. That one part right there, you're correct about, and I can understand what you're saying. I'm going to take that out of my book. I'm not going to have that on the website, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to make that argument, but I got these other arguments over here that I want you to address. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about that. Population size, blah, 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 blah. All that type of stuff, right? No one's going to look down upon you for doing that. But people are going to lose respect for you and continue to do so if you don't acknowledge where your methodology is off. Are there going to be a lot of people in your corner? 100%. Your cheerleaders ain't going nowhere for you. It's the fence sitters that are really searching for truth that I'm talking about. The people that are really going to be weighing out the information for yourself. Your cheerleaders, bruh, you're preaching to the choir. They're not going to fact check nothing. But for the sincere people that are fact checking, the sincere people who are pulling me up on the side saying, you know what, I don't want to see you attack Dante because I'm just trying to figure the information out. They are going to lose respect over time, because they're going to start weighing things out with even scales and recognize, you know what, if I apply this argument evenly, they don't look too good for what I'm saying about the people I come from, or the Limba, or et cetera. It's not an equal argument. Does Dante recognize that if he applied his argument equally across the board, that Limba Jews who took exclusively Bantu women in Southeast Africa would also not be the ancient Israelites? I personally think he gets that. I think he understands enough about DNA to recognize that that's the same. Like, he's making that argument. And if you apply it across the board, it's not going to work. I personally think he knows that. The question is, why wouldn't you address it? And I'm saying, bro, there's no reason not to. There's literally no reason not to. And this is a big, 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 big question, because this is what it all comes down to. And I would even appreciate more of this answer here than it. Bro, I don't need you to be like, I'm wrong. I don't need you to come give a mea culpa to the people, right? I mean, on a scholastic level, that's nice. That keeps your intellectual honesty up, right? No worries. But this here, I'm trying to understand, do you get the concept? Because this is what's big. Does Dante understand the argument that Jewish men married converted women from among the local populations of their travels and changed phenotype over time as a result? Because that's the basic argument that Dr. Brown was making and whatnot, right? Back in terms of what you were talking about. And was trying to say, yeah, this applies to you as well. This applies to the Limba as well. You look like the pop. So, for instance, we can go through Remy Ilona's DNA, right? Where he's talking about he's an Igbo Jew. And on the cover of his book, he has like 1% something Middle Eastern, less than 5% Kenyan, and the rest Nigerian and whatnot, right? Well, why doesn't it say 100% Middle Eastern? Why does it say 92% or whatever, 90-some odd percent Nigerian and less than 5% Kenyan? Because those are the populations that his people intermixed with. If you follow that chain of migration from the Middle East to Kenya to Nigeria, his DNA is saying that he mixed with people. That's, for instance, that's why Dante can have a haplogroup that goes back to the Levant, goes back to Arabia, etc., whatnot, right? Goes back to the Middle East and whatnot, right? But the majority of his autosomal DNA is West African because people were traveling and mixing. And so, does Dante understand that he's 48% Nigerian because people were traveling and mixing? That's the whole point. Does Dante understand that he has his current phenotype because of that admixture, and that he doesn't look like what his what his haplogroup looked like a couple thousand years ago? That's what needs to be understood. Does Dante get that? And if he does get that, can he humble out to the argument? Can he respectfully and scholastically say he understands what Dr. Brown is saying? But I've already gone a little bit beyond the time period that I wanted to go on. I wanted to keep this to a half hour. It's already 40 minutes. So I'm going to keep this short and sweet, fam. I'm going to shut it. You know what? There's one more thing I wanted to do. You know what? I've forgotten. Before I shut it down, I got to do this. Because this is what got me. If you look at Dante's video, he provides a link to his website to where he's talking about he wants Dr. Brown to respond to all these sources that Dante brought out, right? And this is what I found to be extremely interesting. So he shows you Dante. He shows you Dr. Brown's video. Let me make sure my screen share. Yeah, she shows you Dr. Brown's video. He shows you his response to the John. And then he gives you a list of sources. Now, I want you to see this right here. In his list of sources, nowhere does he have the source that he has listed in his book. Nowhere does he have the study from Martin Richards listed anywhere in his book. Or, I mean, listed anywhere in these sources. Anywhere in these 35 sources that he has, right? And so this is what we call a gish gallop technique, right? Gish galloping in rhetorical dialogue and in debates and whatnot is a fallacy to where you try to, it's like you're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks versus dealing with the point on the floor. So the point on the floor is the source and the argument that Dante don't even have up here anymore. Dante's sources aren't even talking about what he's saying in his book, etc. But again, he's not even supplying the source from his book in his rebuttal anymore. But he's not talking about it. He's not relinquishing the argument. So he can see that the source doesn't work, but he's not verbally relinquishing the argument. And that's what I'm saying. Like there's some kind of the hand is quicker than the eye kind of stuff going on there, right? There's some merchandise being made of the people right there. Me personally, I don't scholastically respect that. There's a lot of people that have a lot of scholastic respect for Dante, right? But I'm going to challenge y'all on this. How do you respect the fact that he's pulling sources but not telling you he's pulling them? How do you respect the fact that he's removing them, but he's not owning up to the fact, like, you know what, that argument that I use that source for, I should also remove that argument. Now, again, I'm not casting aspersions on you, man. I don't think he's an evil individual, etc. whatnot, right? But at the same point in time, I'm just going to leave right here. I don't take the methodology serious. I can't take it serious, right? When I see stuff like this. Me and the people I rock with, we don't react this way to being called on sources or whatnot, right? There should be no reason why Dante can't sit down with Dr. Brown. I'm like, you know what? The argument I was making in my book and that I made in that video a couple of years ago, it's not scholastically sound. And thank you for pointing that out to me. I appreciate that. Because if I use that argument, I'm demarcating not only the people I come from, but also the Limba and others. That would be dope. And then, hey, you know what, Dr. Brown? Please deal with these other points that I'm making. That would be dope. I would have a lot of respect for that. I would have a mountain of respect for that. But what I don't have respect for, and I never will have respect for, is special pleading. Can't do it, won't do it. But with that, family, it's been 45 minutes. I'm saying peace and love, and I'm wishing y'all a good night.